You ever have one of those times when at first you weren't entirely sure about a product, and after having followed it for a few years, you kind of changed your mind about it? When the Apple Watch first came out, I remember one of the things that I definitely complained about was the asking price. Um, in the years since, I've gotten into higher end horology as something of a hobby. Not that I ever expect to own any of those timepieces, keep in mind. But it's given me a bit of a perspective and realized that while $349 is not cheap, it's far from the astronomical price of some of these other watches that can do some of the things that the Apple Watch can. And I'm talking about from a blindness perspective, but also from somebody who's partially sighted. So I'm gonna start here by talking about some of the pros of the Apple Watch, and then there are going to be some cons that we will take a look at, because nothing is ever completely rosy, right? I mean, there is always room to improve, always room to upgrade. But in the case of the Apple Watch, comparing it to a traditional watch, there's definitely a divide. So to start with, the advantages of an Apple Watch are that it talks. And I'm talking about the voice-over screen reader. The screen on the right-hand side, you can probably see a little box outlining the text of the SMS message. That is where VoiceOver has focus, and that is where the onboard voice known as Samantha will speak and read you your message. The other way that it can talk, for those of us that don't use VoiceOver, is Mickey Mouse. Let me tell you something. Back when I was young, for those of you who do not know, I had a Mickey Mouse talking watch. You go on eBay, you can take a look at you can search for Sounds Fun Mickey Mouse talking watch. You'll know it's him when you have Mickey's head and his hands wrapped around his chest, and you can literally squeeze his hands and he tells you the time.
1:00 a.m.
In the case of the Apple Watch, you tap on the screen and Mickey will tell you the time. Same thing for Minnie. So that's definitely a throwback to my childhood personally. Now, at the time, I noted that I didn't think that that single feature was enough for the asking price, and that's why I'm glad there's always more. There's more. It's always accurate, which is to say you never have to set it, because it gets its info either for time and date, either from your phone or from the cell towers, depending on which version of the Apple Watch you got. There are multiple watch faces available, including the infograph. This is becoming, I swear, this is honestly becoming one of my favorites, because of the fact that you can have up to eight complications. Now, for those of you who know me, you're going to think, hey, wait a moment, you don't have an Apple Watch yet. It's on my holiday wish list. And whether or not I get it remains to be seen, but I genuinely think that this could make things a lot more convenient, and there are also some features that I'm really looking forward to. What I plan to do personally, if I do get the Apple Watch, is to set up the infograph analog with 4 separate time zones and basically label that as my traveling watch face. That way I can have all times at a glance, where I've been, where I'm going, hubs in between, that sort of thing. And on the digital infograph, there is a section below the time that can be used as a singular complication, and that I plan to dedicate to a 5-day weather forecast. It is swim-proof. You have to initiate the crown and screen lock manually, but it is swim-proof. Now, the reason I say that I know about these things is because if you go to mysticaccess.com, there you can download a tutorial for the Apple Watch from the perspective of somebody who is blind. They talk about how to use it with voiceover. They talk about features I didn't even know existed. After having listened to that tutorial, it's only making me more excited for this device. So yes, it is swim-proof. Again, you need to activate that mode manually. The heart monitoring, no joke, this thing has been in the news and has literally saved people's lives. It would give you a notification saying, hey, maybe your heart rate is a little bit too high, maybe you should go to the doctor. And they're working on the ability to be able to detect when it is too low. Now, how does the watch know? Well, that's where the health app comes in on the iPhone. You would basically enter your credentials and your vitals, weight, height, age, that sort of thing. And the watch would then take a baseline for somebody of your height, weight, age, and then determine basically what a ballpark figure is for an acceptable heart rate, what might not be. And of course, this isn't a be-all, end-all, but the fact that it is able to alert you to the possibility of something going wrong. Again, there have been instances in the news where this watch, if people weren't wearing it, they wouldn't be alive right now. So that, I think, is a major, major plus. There is something else, and this is specific to voiceover users. This is an Iwc Minute Repeater. So what is a minute repeater? It is a type of complication in an analog mechanical watch, and it was designed way back when, before we had electric lights. During the night, people are going to want a way to tell the time. And in the days of candles, obviously, you didn't necessarily have that because we didn't have screens like we do nowadays, and everything was mechanical. So what they did was they came up with a minute repeater. So let me give you an example. I'm going to imitate a minute repeater here, okay? So basically, the time now is 1:24. So the watch will go ding, ding dong, ding, 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 ding. So it basically does that every time you pull this little lever, and for those of you who cannot see, it is a lever that stretches from 10 o'clock to 8 o'clock with the thicker end at the 10 o'clock position. You pull that down towards 8 o'clock, and then it will trigger the mechanism, which incidentally is not on the same mainspring as the timekeeping mechanism. So even when the watch is stopped, you could go ahead and listen to it if you so wish. These days, a minute repeater is a novelty, and an expensive novelty at that. This is that same Iwc that I showed you. I'm going to zoom in here. You're not going to be able to see me for a moment. I want you to take a look at this. $57,355. It's a 54 joule automatic movement. Gray dial minute repeater at the 9 o'clock position. So this is basically 43-hour power reserve. So as I said, this watch these days is a real novelty. Now, how on earth does this even relate to the Apple Watch? Because for voiceover users, there is a feature called Tactile Time. And as far as I can figure, particularly when you set it to digits, that is a direct, in my opinion, an honest-to-God spiritual successor to the minute repeater. It's also a really nice convergence because a lot of people who have talking watches are worried about setting them off in public, and a lot of people with Braille watches are worried about, in some ways, if you get a really cheap one, chances are the hands can be easily manipulated. Well, the Apple Watch basically covers both instances, where you could have VoiceOver tell you the time, or with the screen off, you double tap, and what'll happen is it will give you the time in tactile vibrations. So in the time that I was explaining that 3 minutes have passed, it is now 1:27. So what would happen is you would hear one short buzz, one short buzz, 2 medium buzzes, and 7 short buzzes, if that makes sense. So it would be like buzz, 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 buzz. So you get the idea. Basically, that's how that would work. And in a way, I do consider that to be a spiritual successor to the Minute Repeater, because it tells the time in a very similar way. Now, there are 2 other ways to tell the time tactily. One of them is by terse, and that is something that I find honestly very confusing. What happens is the long vibrations that under digits would mimic every 10 hours and 10-minute increments, the medium vibrations would note every 5 hours, and then the short vibrations would note every quarter hour. I honestly find that very confusing. And I don't think I would honestly ever use it. But the point is, you've got the best of both worlds. You've got a tactile watch, you've got a talking watch, and neither of those have to be set. So tactile time, great, great feature. And I want you to note something here. $57,000 for that Minute Repeater. Let's take a look at the features that I've listed so far. Mickey Mouse talking watch, VoiceOver accessibility, the heart rate monitor, things like text and notifications that I'll get to in a moment. Considering everything that this watch can do, yes, $399 is expensive, but I can see where this could be a merging of the old and the new. Does that make sense? And if you're getting a spiritual successor to a Minute Repeater for $400 versus $57,000, you can see that is a definite price difference. Now, for those of you who might be watching who are into a haute horology, which is basically high-end timepieces that are like worth a fortune, don't skin me just yet, because we're getting to you guys in a moment, because that is going to be in my cons of the Apple Watch section. So the other really great thing is the activity rings. Being able to monitor your health. Again, you enter your vitals, and not only can the watch detect your heart rate, but it'll give you standing reminders. This is honestly, I'm very much looking forward to this, because I'll be able to take advantage of that in terms of making sure that I actually get up and get moving, which not only is healthy for me in general, but as somebody with cerebral palsy, if I sit for a long time, my heels get really tight. So I could see that definitely being an advantage. Walkie-Talkie. I've got a close friend of mine who's going to be getting an Apple Watch actually on Wednesday. Theirs is going to arrive. And I'm personally really looking forward to sending them little walkie-talkie voice messages back and forth. And if any of my other family members get an Apple Watch, I could send them walkie-talkie messages. Really looking forward to that. Text replies. You could reply through writing, through dictation. You could send emojis. I personally think that I'm going to use dictation. Calls, if the phone's in my pocket or it's too deep in my pocket, like let's say it's, for some reason hard to reach, then I could go ahead and answer the call on the watch. More importantly than all of that, though, is the emergency SOS feature. As somebody who is partially sighted, I could see myself taking advantage of that in times of an emergency, because especially at night, you don't know who's going to be up and around you. It's nice to be able to know that the watch has your back. All you have to do is press and hold that side button, and it will send out an alert and start calling your emergency contacts. And the fall detection too. As I mentioned in a prior video, like I said, I do have cerebral palsy, so I might trip. And if I end up tripping in such a way where I can't get up, it's nice to know that that the watch will have the ability to call emergency services. Easy to swap bands. Typically with an old-fashioned watch, or any other watch for that matter, in order for me to swap the bands, I've actually had to go to a jeweler and have the bands swapped out that way and pay an additional 10 to 20 bucks. Whereas with the Apple Watch, at the 12 and 6 o'clock position are little depressions in the surface. You press and hold on those, and you literally slide the bands out. It could not be easier. And I know a lot of smartwatches have adopted this. I'm not so sure. I haven't really been keeping up with the regular watches lately. But I'm sure that there are some out there where you could just hit a button, and the pins will deploy, and you can remove the band. Digital crown on the Series 4 will mimic the overall feel of a mechanical crown on a mechanical watch. That's something else I'm really looking forward to, because I grew up with mechanical timepieces. My father, for those of you who do not know, because I do get new subscribers from time to time, he had an old 1980s Bulova. I personally own an Orient Bambino open heart mechanical watch. And one of the things that I just love is putting it up to my ear and hearing that tick, 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 tick sound. There is no sound like it. They call it an open heart because it genuinely is like a beating heart. And this is where we get into the disadvantages of the Apple Watch. Something like the Orient can be classified as an heirloom. This is something that, if properly cared for, can literally last forever. Even more so, this holds true with something like the Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso, one of my favorite timepieces. I don't think I'll ever buy one of these, though, unless I'm like 80 years old with $1 million in the bank, which obviously at the moment I'm not, or somebody gifts it to me. But the really great thing about a watch like this is that it's got history. It's got heritage behind it, because the Reverso, as an example, was created for, I believe it was polo players in the early 1900s. The idea was you could take the watch case, slide it, flip it over, and it'll be protected when you're playing your game. Nowadays, they take that reversing case back, hence the Reverso name, and decorating it in a whole manner of ways. You can do it up any way you like, even with dual watch faces. And in this example, these are handmade mechanical movements. That is where the advantage of a mechanical and the disadvantage of the Apple Watch really starts to sink in. When it comes to the Apple Watch, it does all these great things, but there's no soul. The mechanical watch in and of itself is an art. It genuinely is an art. In fact, there are some pieces that cost several $1 million, and they are designed to really show off the art and craft of the mechanical watch. You can see these two Reversos pictured here have clearly different movements and clearly different display ways to show them off. These are just absolutely beautiful pieces. Whereas if you take a look on the inside of an Apple Watch, all you see is the battery, the Taptic engine, and whatever else you have inside. It really is, in a way, it's a wrist computer, versus something that people have put their heart and soul into. And the other interesting thing is, a couple years ago, I mentioned that This was before the Apple Watch, keep in mind. This was about, I think, a year before the Apple Watch came on the scene. I mentioned that for something like the G-Shock's water resistance and the 5 alarms that it has, because I do have a G-Shock, I have 2 of them actually. Or actually, no, I'm sorry, I have a G-Shock and a Wave Scepter. I did have 2 G-Shocks, but I gave one of them to a relative. My point is, to equal the 5 alarms of the G-Shock, plus the radio-controlled timekeeping, plus the water resistance, plus the durability in talking watches, you'd have to buy at least 3 or 4 different models. You'd have to buy, for instance, you would have to buy a talking watch and a braille watch. You got 2 of them in one. This is like $90, and replacing the battery on this thing is a real bear because it's literally 2 different movements with 2 different batteries. I've seen in a video from Australia how they do it. You have to take off the back, then you have to take out the voice movement, literally take out the module that powers the voice in order to get to the battery that powers the hands. So it's a really complex system. It's not an easy thing to do at all. And again, you've got the 4 alarms, so we're already up to $100 bucks. $160 for an atomic watch, you know, all these plus the atomic. $175, maybe $180 for a water resist. This is a water resistant talking watch. You cannot go swimming, and you notice it's $160, $180. What I'm doing is I'm adding on the prices here. So $180 we're up to so far. That's $15, $20 for a water resistant talking watch. No talking watch is ever completely waterproof. You can never go swimming with them because they need to have holes in the back for the speaker. That exposes the internals to the elements. So if you take it swimming, you're screwed. And then you've got a talking pedometer. This particular one, I believe, sold for between $15 and $20 because I recommended it to somebody recently. But again, you can see, and also pricing aside, some of you may run the math and say, well, that's still cheaper than the Apple Watch. Think about having to maintain all these devices. I've got a 4-alarm talking watch whose battery died in a year. And it would actually cost more to replace the battery than it would to get a new watch. And then, of course, there is a braille watch out there that is mechanical. But I'm going to show you something. You're not going to be able to see me for a moment. So this particular watch is $45. This has got a Japanese mechanical movement. They don't say what one, and that kind of bothers me because a lot of times with these mechanical movements, if they're cheaply made, you can run into trouble with them pretty quick. And again, it depends on the type of movement, who makes it, what their reputation is. Tactile markings. Okay, this is what I don't get, okay? So this watch, they say it has a 36 power reserve, but right here it says quality quartz movement, always keeping the correct time. For those of you who are not really up onto watches, so a mechanical movement is like the gears and the springs and whatnot that power something like the Reverso or the Bambino Open Heart that I showed you earlier. All of that power comes off of a balance wheel that regulates everything. A quartz movement, on the other hand, the regulator is in the form of a quartz crystal powered by a battery. The two of them are literally incompatible. You can't have a mechanical movement and a quartz movement in the same watch. It's impossible. So that alone suggests to me that this is false advertising. But it's interesting how the Apple Watch can do so much, and yet, for what it is, I mean, like I said, you've got an audible talking watch, you've got a tactile watch, you've got a watch that is able to monitor your health, and in some certain instances, quite literally save your life with things like the high and low heart monitoring and the SOS features. It's a convenience being able to answer a call on your watch. Especially if you're a lady, you got a purse, you may keep your phone in your purse. Just overall, a wonderful tool. But again, there's no soul. There's no heart in it. Whereas with the mechanical watch, let me show you again with the Bambino. See, right here at the 9 o'clock position, you've got the open heart mechanism. That is the balance wheel that regulates everything. Each mechanical watch is different. It is its own unique personality. For instance, my Bambino ends up gaining, I'd say at least 1 to 2 minutes a week. Or is it 5 to 6? It all depends, again, on the temperature. It depends on the humidity. It's just like us. We operate differently as human beings in different conditions. It's the same way with these mechanical watches. They are a time-honored tradition, a labor of love, and each of these has the ability to be an heirloom. Whereas again, with a mechanical, with the Apple Watch, it's just a computer on a wrist. And I think that Apple learned very quickly that the market for the Apple Watch Edition is also the market that would go after something like the Reverso or something even more expensive like that $54,000 Iwc Minute Repeater. And they expect when they make an investment like that it'll last a lifetime. The Apple Watch, being that it is again a computer on the wrist, it won't last a lifetime. Eventually, it is going to break down. Whereas, again, if you keep one of these properly serviced and you put the time and love into it, it can literally last generations. So the Apple Watch, I think, is definitely a worthwhile investment, but I don't think it can hold a candle to the true passion that is the mechanical watch. So I say get the Apple Watch. It is a wonderful product. Again, I've got one on my wish list for the holidays, hoping that we'll see if I get it or not. But if you're truly into mechanical watches, don't ever give up on that, because that is, again, a beautiful piece of art. Unfortunately, for those of us who are blind, mechanical braille watches, you already saw just a moment ago how fake the advertising, I honestly think, might be for that one. And that's the only one that's mechanical. If you want something else, you might have to go on eBay and look at something from Russia or something from the 1950s that may or may not be in good enough condition to keep going. I've got a mechanical watch from my grandfather, a mechanical pocket watch from my late grandfather, and that watch will always be with me, and I will always love it. But to get it going again would probably be in excess of the value of the watch. It would probably need a complete rebuild. So, yeah, there are definitely pros and cons to all of it. But what do you guys think? Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.